60 days. That's how long it's been since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her own home in the middle of the night. 60 days since an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and limited mobility was taken from her bed. And 60 days since the most powerful investigative machine in the world hit a wall. Tonight, we're going to walk through something that almost no one is talking about clearly enough. A retired FBI special agent has spent weeks analyzing this case publicly, and his conclusion is not what the official investigation wants you to hear. He does not believe the primary motive was ransom. He believes the architecture of this crime, the preparation, the timing, the behavior on that footage, the silence that followed, points towards something other than what has been publicly framed for 60 days. If he's right, then 40,000 tips aimed at a ransom kidnapping are 40,000 tips aimed in the wrong direction. Let's build to that. But first, the numbers. Because before you can understand why one analyst believes the motive is wrong, you have to understand the scale of the effort that the right motive was supposed to produce. Interview, FBI spokesperson, early February. First we want the community to know that the FBI is doing everything in our power to bring Nancy Guthrie home to her family. That was the first promise. And on paper, they kept it. Day 60, 40,000 tips. Some sources say as many as 50,000. For 100 investigators at the height of the search, the most advanced forensic tools in the history of American law enforcement, DNA analysis, genetic genealogy, digital forensics, every government database that exists, every frame of footage pulled from every camera in a neighborhood that law enforcement treated as a crime scene from the first hour. Every tool, every resource, every dollar. And they still cannot find one man. One man who walked up to a front door in the dark and stood there. A man who looked at a camera without knowing that the camera he was trying to disable had already recorded him. One man wearing a ski mask with openings for his eyes and his mouth, meaning his black mustache, visible through that opening, is confirmed. His height is documented. His build is on record. His eyes cannot be surgically changed. His walk has been captured on video from multiple angles at multiple points during his time on that property. One man carrying a weapon, a black 25-liter backpack on his shoulders, moving with a purpose that every professional who has studied this footage has described the same way, deliberately prepared, like someone who had thought about exactly what he was doing long before he arrived at that door. For 100 investigators, 40 to 50,000 tips, 2 months, and that man does not have a name. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching this channel, or if you've been following this case with us from the beginning, hit like, subscribe, and share this video right now. Share it with someone who needs to know this story. Because the case of Nancy Guthrie is not just a true crime story. It is a story about what happens when an elderly woman, someone's mother, is taken from her home in the middle of the night, and the most powerful investigative apparatus in the world spends 2 months trying to find out why. This channel exists to cover stories that matter. If you believe this one does, share it. Then stay with us. Because what comes next is the part nobody is talking about clearly enough. The evening of January 31st, 2026. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has lived in the Tucson area for more than 50 years. She has limited mobility, couldn't walk 50 yards on her own. She is not someone who wanders. She is not someone who leaves. She is, by every account, exactly where she was supposed to be on the last night she was seen. Her son-in-law drops her off at her Catalina Foothills home following a dinner with family. Approximately 9:50 p.m. She goes inside. The door closes. And that is the last moment anyone can place Nancy Guthrie on this earth with certainty. The next morning, she doesn't show up at a friend's house where she was expected to watch an online church service. That friend raises the alarm. Family is contacted. Shortly before noon, relatives arrive at her door. At 12:03 p.m. on February 1st, they are on the phone with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Within hours, Sheriff Chris Nanos stands in front of cameras and uses a word that transforms a welfare check into a national crisis. Abducted. Not missing. Not unaccounted for. Abducted. We do believe that Nancy was taken from her home against her will, Nanos said. And that's where we're at. The investigators who processed that crime scene found things that confirmed it. Blood, drops of it at or near the entrance to the home. The back doors propped open. Her phone, her purse, her essential belongings, all still inside. A woman who needed daily medication to survive had left without it. The Nest camera at her front door had been disconnected at 1:47 a.m. The pacemaker monitoring her heart had lost contact with her phone at 2:28 a.m. Between those two timestamps, something happened inside that home that nobody outside of law enforcement fully understands yet. Interview, President Trump. It's so bad. I didn't like when they were talking about going after the pacemaker, before they even started going after it, they're coming and reporting it. So, when the FBI released the footage, images recovered from residual data in the back end of her doorbell camera, pulled by the Bureau working alongside Google engineers, the country got its first look at the man investigators believed was involved. A masked figure, armed, carrying a backpack, moving around the front of the property with a familiarity that made every professional who watched it uncomfortable. He tried to cover the camera with his hand. He pulled foliage from the front yard to obstruct the lens. He did not panic. He did not rush. He worked with the calm of someone who had thought through this moment before it arrived. Interview, FBI official. In terms of what the FBI is doing, we are providing the following support: downloading and analyzing cell phones, obtaining cell tower information, conducting interviews, and providing any and all investigative support that the Sheriff's Department needs. The FBI published physical descriptors on February 12, 2026. Male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches. Average build, black mustache, 25-liter black Ozark Trail Hiker pack, the kind sold exclusively at Walmart. Armed, that description went to 40 to 50,000 tips, and it went to 400 investigators. 400 investigators. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, search and rescue teams, task force units. At its peak, approximately 17 days into the investigation, this case had the infrastructure of a major terrorism operation. FBI Director Kash Patel flew to Tucson in person. Senator Mark Kelly stood outside the sheriff's headquarters and said he had tremendous confidence in the team assembled to find her. Tremendous confidence. 400 people, 40 to 50,000 tips. That was day 17. Today is day 60. And the man on that camera, 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, black mustache, Walmart backpack, gun on his body, still does not have a name. To understand why that is extraordinary, you have to understand what 60 days actually means in a case like this. In the history of high-profile abduction investigations involving clear surveillance footage with documented physical identifiers, the gap between footage release and identification has typically been measured in days, sometimes hours. Surveillance footage does what a description alone cannot. It shows you how a person moves, their proportions, the specific way they carry themselves under pressure. All of those things are difficult to hide. All of them are recognizable to people who know the person being filmed. The footage is not vague. It is close. Doorbell footage recovered from back-end data that the suspect believed had been erased. A mustache visible enough to make the FBI's official descriptor release. A backpack specific enough to trace to a single retail chain. A weapon on his body. All of that detail, and still no name after 60 days. That gap is what every analyst keeps returning to. It tells you something about this man, or about the structure of this investigation, that the numbers alone cannot explain. Now consider what the public has been told to look for. Early reporting asked, "Where is Nancy?" Late reporting asks, "Why hasn't she been found?" The pressure on Sheriff Nanos has moved from professional to institutional. His own deputies passed a unanimous no-confidence vote calling for his resignation. A recall effort is underway with hundreds of volunteers collecting signatures. Whatever the merits of those political pressures, they are now a daily backdrop to an investigation that has produced no public breakthrough in 60 days. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, the NBC Today co-anchor, returned to television briefly for a deeply personal interview. Interview, Savannah Guthrie. The weekend your mom went missing. Tell me what you were doing and what happened. She described the back doors of her mother's house being found propped open. She described calling her brother and asking whether their mother had been targeted because of her, and how he replied, "We're sorry, sweetie, but yeah, maybe." She said she wakes up every night in the dark imagining what her mother went through. Calls it unthinkable. Tell me what you thought when you saw those images of the person who took your mother. I mean, it's just absolutely terrifying. And I can't imagine that that is who she saw standing over her bed. She said she was sorry. The country watched an adult daughter publicly carry the weight of something she cannot control, cannot solve, and cannot escape. None of that has produced a name. 60 days. And the man on the camera is still standing there, frozen in that footage, waiting to be identified. One of the most anticipated forensic leads in this case illustrates the problem better than any explanation could. Early in the investigation, a black glove was found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI said it appeared to visually match the gloves worn by the suspect in the footage. A DNA profile was recovered and submitted to CODIS, the National DNA Database. No match. Interview Sheriff Nanos. We gathered all the evidence we could, fingerprints, DNA, camera images, everything you can imagine, and we gathered that out. Those things have been submitted forward to labs, to technological companies to help us. Investigators continued their analysis, and through further work, they identified the source of the DNA. The glove had nothing to do with the case. The DNA traced to a restaurant employee who worked across the street from where the glove was found. Sheriff Nanos confirmed it. The owner of the glove we found working at a restaurant across the street. It has nothing to do with the case. A lead the public had been tracking for weeks. Closed. What remains active is a separate and more significant track. Mixed DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home that does not belong to her or to those in close contact with her. That sample is at a private laboratory in Florida. Sources close to the investigation have raised concern that the sample may not yield a usable profile, what investigators call low-level DNA. Investigators are also pursuing genetic genealogy on this sample, the same technique that cracked the Golden State Killer case. As of day 60, no result has been publicly confirmed. That is the real forensic frontier of this investigation, not the cleared gloves, the mixed DNA from inside the house, and it has not yet produced a name. Now let's talk about the theory that changes everything. Cheryl McCullum is a crime scene investigator. She is the founder and director of the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute, which partners with universities across the country to work cases that have gone cold. She has worked the Boston Strangler, Natalie Holloway, cases that most investigators had either given up on or filed away. In 2023, she was inducted into the National Law Enforcement Hall of Fame. Her Emmy came from her CSI work on a case out of Atlanta that cracked open despite decades of official silence. She is not a television personality who comments on crime from a safe distance. She is someone who has spent her career in the room where the actual work happens. From the beginning of the Nancy Guthrie case, McCullum has returned to one number, 41 minutes. Here's what that number refers to. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., a separate house camera detected motion, but no video was captured because the camera had no active subscription. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker lost contact with her phone. From camera disconnect to pacemaker disconnect, 41 minutes. 41 minutes that a man was at, in, or around that property. 41 minutes during which an 84-year-old woman with severe mobility limitations was removed from her home. McCullum's conclusion: this was never about the money. She does not believe the ransom demand, the cryptocurrency notes sent to multiple outlets, the deadlines that passed without resolution, was the genuine objective of what happened that night. She believes the ransom architecture was either a distraction, a misdirection, or a secondary framework layered over a crime that had a different primary motivation entirely. Think about what that means practically. The ransom notes that arrived in the days after February 1st went to media outlets, not directly to the family through a private, secure channel. They demanded cryptocurrency. 2 deadlines passed without payment and without contact from whoever sent them explaining the lapse. That is not how professional ransom operations function. Ransom operations are built around sustained communication with the family because contact is the mechanism through which payment is eventually extracted. Silence after a past deadline in a genuine ransom kidnapping is a crisis for the captor as much as for the family. It means leverage is eroding. It means the captor is not getting what they came for. The notes went to news organizations. The deadlines passed. And then nothing. No new escalation. No new deadline. No proof of life. That trajectory does not fit the pattern of a captor who desperately needs their ransom paid. It fits the pattern of something else. Steve Moore, retired FBI special agent who spent his career specializing in missing persons cases, has been saying publicly what many investigators were likely saying privately. By day 40, Moore was direct. It's getting more possible every day that they were driven by money, but I think this had to do with violence or sexual activity or pure robbery or randomness. He went further. Moore stated directly that Nancy may not have been the primary victim. Let that sit for a moment. A retired FBI special agent in missing persons cases is raising the possibility that the 84-year-old woman whose blood was found at her front door, whose pacemaker went silent in the early hours of February 1st, may not have been the person this crime was primarily designed to affect. That is a different investigation than the one that has been publicly running for 60 days. Moore also examined the mechanics of the ransom demand itself. He observed that whoever planned and executed this went through, in his words, an immense amount of trouble, an immense amount of planning, risked their lives, essentially got through all of this and didn't get a dime. That observation is not rhetorical. It is analytical. If you execute a high-risk, highly planned operation for ransom and the ransom is never collected, either something went catastrophically wrong with the plan or collection was never genuinely the point. One of those possibilities is a kidnapping that failed. The other is something else entirely dressed in the clothes of a kidnapping. Now, hold up the counterweight. The kidnapping for ransom theory is the official position of the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI, the agencies that have reviewed every piece of evidence, including what has not been made public. The ransom notes are real. Savannah Guthrie herself said she believes the notes her family responded to were genuine. The FBI does not deploy a kidnapping task force on speculation. The blood evidence confirms violent removal. Nancy's DNA was confirmed in the blood found near the entrance of her home. Something violent happened at that location. Whether that violence was the mechanism of a ransom kidnapping or something else remains the open question. But the violence itself is documented and confirmed. And the DNA evidence from inside the home is still being processed. That is not a dead end. It is an active scientific investigation with an outcome still pending. In late March 2026, Sheriff Nanos told Tucson station KWLD that investigators now believe something may have occurred as early as January 11th, 3 weeks before Nancy vanished, based on the FBI's analysis of digital equipment and electronic data. The Guthrie family referenced that date in their March 21st public statement, asking neighbors to search their memories for that specific evening. That is not the posture of an investigation that has given up. It is an investigation still moving, still finding new data points, still refining its understanding of how far back the preparation for this event goes. So where does that leave us at day 60? The man on that footage is still unidentified. He walked up to a door in the dark. He looked at a camera. He tried to cover it with his hand, then with a piece of the garden, then walked away into the night. And somewhere between the moment that camera went dark and the moment Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker went silent, something happened in that house that only a small number of people in the world know about. One of them is him. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department believe it was a targeted ransom kidnapping. Steve Moore believes the ransom narrative is increasingly hard to sustain, that something else was the real driver. Cheryl McCullum believes it was never about the money. Former FBI agent Harry Trombitas believes Nancy could still be recovered alive. Every one of those positions is grounded in professional experience. Every one of them is looking at the same publicly available evidence. And they do not agree. That disagreement at day 60 is not a failure of analysis. It is the honest state of a case that has not yet been solved. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She needs daily medication to survive. She has a pacemaker that went silent in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. 60 days later, her family does not know where she is. Her daughter has gone back to work because, as she said herself, she cannot not go back. It is her family. It is her purpose. And she still does not have her mother. We are going to keep watching this case. Every press conference, every development, every time a former agent or a forensic investigator says something that shifts the analysis. Every time a tip produces a lead that changes what we know. If you are not subscribed, subscribe now. Share this video, not because we're asking you to, but because the story of Nancy Guthrie is a story about what can happen to an elderly person living alone. And the people watching right now who have aging parents, grandparents, or loved ones in similar situations deserve to know.